A leader cannot expand the capacity of an organization beyond their ability of expanding their own capacity. So it's always about, like, who do you want to be as a leader? How do you want others to experience you? And how do you want to experience yourself? And then reverse engineer that, not just in terms of what you do, but how you're thinking about what you do. And you'll often find that it's the thinking, the belief, that really needs to change in order for the action to be sustainable.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. At the start of the year, I asked you to do something deceptively simple. I asked you to imagine your dream job. Not the title or the salary, but the work itself. You know, how you spend your days. So I've gotten a lot of emails this week, and a lot of you wrote to say some version of the same thing. I can picture it, but I don't quite believe that it's possible for me. I don't know how I could get there. Well, that gap is what we're going to dig into today. This episode is about blocking beliefs. Those are the stories we carry that limit what we reach for and really how we lead. You know, they're rarely irrational. In fact, most of them once protected us in some way. They helped us to succeed or to get promoted. The problem is that as we grow, those beliefs, they don't always grow with us. Unblocking them really is about noticing what's no longer serving you and doing the steady and sometimes uncomfortable work of choosing differently. Now, to help us do that, I am joined today by Muriel Wilkins. Muriel is an executive coach and the founder and CEO of Paravis Partners. She works with C-suite leaders at moments when what got them here is no longer enough to get them where they're going. Her new book is Leadership Unblocked. It's a practical guide to identifying the beliefs that hold us back and replacing them with more flexible, sustainable ways of leading and living. In this conversation, Muriel breaks down the beliefs that block our ability to connect, to grow, and to step into the work that we actually want. She offers a clear roadmap for an ongoing practice that makes work and life feel lighter over time. Now, if that dream job, the one we talked about that is today 10 years out, if it feels absolutely impossible for you to imagine getting to, well, then this conversation is the right place to start. Here's my conversation with Muriel Wilkins. I didn't think anything was blocking me until I read your book, and I thought for the first time, oh my goodness, if I actually addressed some of these blocking beliefs, I could be so much more effective in my day-to-day.
Yeah, and not just effective. I think you would be able to just go through your day with a little more ease. And that's really my mission. You know, the challenges are not going to go away as much as we want them to. And we all set out, and all my clients are like, let's just get rid of all the challenges out there.
Right.
They're not going away, you know, whether you're a leader, a parent, a teacher. But how you approach and how you respond to those challenges is what's in your control. And you can respond to them in a way that doesn't make you so tight and frustrated and stressed out all the time, but rather, again, approach them with a bit more ease. And sometimes what stands in the way are these blockers or these beliefs that we have that then don't allow us to do that.
So the book is laid out exploring a series of these beliefs. I believe there are 7.
Yes.
Right? 7 beliefs that routinely come up that you actually may need somebody to hold a mirror in front of you in order to see. And you also offer us the tools to engage with the beliefs in a productive way.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, is there one that is the de facto standout? Like, this gets in the way for most people?
There's not one that rises to the top. The 7 that I saw were the 7 that I saw most popular amongst all the clients that I had worked with. But they are not the only 7, right? I think part of this is discovering which ones are for you. I would say that there's one that is particularly popular for high achievers, and that's the one of, I need it done now.
Oh, goodness. I need it done now.
Yes, I need it done now. Urgency for everything.
Okay, so how does that creep out? I mean, look, I work within an organization that is all about execution. It doesn't need to be done now. It needs to be done 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And so that's very much the culture of the organization in which we work.
Yeah.
How does it creep into a leader's life as a limiting belief?
Yeah. I mean, like all the others, it often creeps in because it has helped you tremendously for a long time. So when I think about my own story, when I was an individual contributor and very fresh out of college, that first job many, many years ago, my ability to get things done quickly for my one critical stakeholder who was my boss is what allowed me to then get promoted and accelerated my career, et cetera. So that was one of my secret powers. Well, the problem is when you end up scaling in your leadership or growing in terms of your position, and you're still using the same recipe that worked for you in the past, in your current situation, it might not necessarily be helpful to you, right? It might be helpful in certain situations, but not all of them. And so the I need it done now, unfortunately, while it certainly is helpful in getting you to be productive, then ends up being these, employee engagement scores where you're like, oh, shoot, like, why are people saying they're burned out? Why are people saying that it always feels like we're drinking from a fire hose? Why is it saying that people don't want to work with you anymore? Why is it saying that it's unclear what the priorities are? I thought I made them clear. And so that's where the shift means that it becomes a blocker rather than something that's actually helpful to you.
I love how you point out that actually many of these blockers actually began as our superpowers.
Absolutely.
Right? This is why you were able to rise at the beginning of your career.
Yep.
But so many of the learnings that happen for us as professionals as we rise happen because we learn to let go of the things that worked best for us and try our hand at new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is what you're asking us to gently do with these beliefs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gently and not so gently, right? I mean, I think a big thing about this, Jessi, is like, it's not about changing who you are. And it's also not about letting go of the beliefs, right? When we were trying to come up with a title for the book, one of the ideas was, let go of the beliefs that limit your potential. And I was like, no, because you might need to pick that one up one time. If the house is on fire, I need you to do it now. I need you to get out of the house, right? But the question is, as you grow, not only as a leader, but quite frankly, as you mature as an adult, your capacity to have range in terms of the different beliefs and assumptions that you hold and make sure that they're aligned with the outcomes you want is what the magic is, right?
Yeah.
That's what enables us, again, to have more of that ease because we can adapt. We're a little more fluid. The issue is when we just hold on so tightly to that one script, right? And then say, there's no other way that I can do this. And we're not even saying that consciously. That's why they're hidden. It's all subconsciously that then gets us in trouble. So the point here is not to change who you are. I always say it's range over change. It's about expanding who you are, expanding the type of range that you have in terms of the choices you have. Because from my standpoint, that is then what gives you agency, what it enables you to have choice in terms of the way that you move as a leader or move in the world.
Okay, that sounds so great in theory. Let's come back to the initial belief that you just identified, right? I need it done now. In practice, how does that play out?
We have to be very specific about the words that we use, not only when we say them out there, but when we're saying them to ourselves. And that's what these beliefs are. So for something like I need it done now, it's really just a very slight reframe. An example is moving from I need it done now to I need certain things done now. And that little word in and of itself then creates an action, right? It triggers an action. You're then able to say, okay, well, what are the certain things that actually need to get done right now? And prioritize what those are versus just this blanket, I need everything done now, which is really not satiating your business, but really satiating a need that you have to feel in control.
It also helps the people who work for you and with you not to feel like you're a micromanager.
Absolutely, right?
But part of what you're saying is that there might be moments when you need to step in and drive, again, more forcefully. You need to micromanage. And if you have full range, you can step back and forth.
Being mindful from a leadership standpoint, or anyone, quite frankly, is just noticing in the moment, what is the outcome I'm really looking to drive to? And is the way that I am not only behaving, not only what am I doing, but also what I'm thinking about what I'm doing, is that aligned with the outcome that I want? So I always start there. Do you want to be a micromanager? Is that the outcome you're driving to? Oh, you are? Okay, then, the belief I need to be involved or the belief I need it done now completely aligns with that,
Yeah.
go for it,
Yeah.
right? But if what you're telling me is I want to be a leader who is inspiring and who develops people and people are engaged and my team feels like they have autonomy and that my team feels like, yes, we work hard, but it's a healthy work hard. Well, then those two beliefs, particularly that I need it done now, one which we've been talking about, is not aligned with the behaviors that lead to that outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So it's always about who do you want to be as a leader? How do you want others to experience you? And how do you want to experience yourself? And then reverse engineer that, not just in terms of what you do, but how you're thinking about what you do. And you'll often find that it's the thinking, the belief that really needs to change in order for the action to be sustainable.
How do we effectively change a belief? Because beliefs are hardwired.
Yeah.
We can raise our consciousness around something without changing it. I'll give you a small example. I'm pretty sure my wife will never hang up her towel after a shower. We have collectively in the house raised her consciousness around it. But making changes, even the smallest changes, that's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with wanting to, right? Wanting a different outcome. It's not about so much, I want to change the belief or I want to change the way that I am. Again, it's more around, do you want something different on the other side? So if your wife, for example, I don't know how it plays out in your household. I'll tell you how it plays out in my household, right? It's the shoes for me, the shoes in the foyer. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
If people in my household said, you know what, we don't want mommy to be aggravated anymore around the shoes, or we don't want mom to trip over the shoes at nighttime anymore when she walks in.
Right.
Oh, maybe then because that's what I want, I need to change the behavior, which is put the shoes away. And in order to change the behavior, then the thinking has to change. And the thinking might move from, I don't really care where the shoes are, to this is a house that we all live in and I respect everybody who lives here. Therefore, I will put my things away. Yeah. So it's the reframe of the belief that then leads to action. So is there difficulty in making that reframe? There can be, right? But the difficulty comes in, again, when we are so attached to the way that we think that we're unwilling to let it go. And the question becomes, why are we unwilling to let it go? We're unwilling to let it go because we so identify with that thought or that belief or that assumption that we actually think that if we move away from it, in some way we're abandoning ourselves, right?
I love that you point that out, right? Because it's rarely that we're afraid that the product will drop or die or that the service won't be delivered the way we need it to. It's so much more about identity.
That's right.
Letting go the way that we think about ourselves.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so give us another limiting belief that gets in people's ways.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so one of the ones that was a big surprise for me that I did not expect when I did the analysis was the, if I can do it, so can you. And that one is pretty much like, well, if I can work till, all hours of the night, so can you.
Yeah.
If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's not necessarily the case, right? Why? Because we don't all have the same stories and we don't all have the same beliefs. We don't all have the same experiences. You would have to really, I'm 55. You would have to look at from September 15th, 1970 to today, and say, we've had the exact same experience for me to be able to then say, everything that applies for me also applies to you in this given circumstance. So the issue is it prohibits us from meeting people where they are. Yeah. And when I look at what leaders are called to do, one of the biggest things is they're called to influence, they're called to develop, they're called to coach. Well, if you can't meet people where they are, you cannot do any of those things.
I think a false understanding we sometimes have when we think about letting go of that is that we're lowering the standards for the people around us.
Yeah.
Because we mistakenly think of our way of doing it as inherently the right way of doing it.
Yeah.
And so any other way of doing it is like falling down a little bit on the job.
There's also this underlying concern, right?
Yeah.
What would happen to me if I didn't hold myself to these expectations? Yeah. Right. So there's always this underlying need that we're trying to fulfill with these beliefs that can help us, but also very much get in our way.
Yeah. One of the blockers that really rang true for me was this blocker around belonging.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I belong.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually point to every place in my career where that held me back.
Mm.
And I would love for you to talk a little bit to where you see it manifesting.
Yeah. We all know that there are a lot of systemic challenges that don't lead to folks feeling like they belong. I can speak for myself, right?
Yeah.
As a woman, as a Black woman, there are certainly societies and systemic things that could make me feel like I don't belong. And so I struggled with it because while I want to give people agency in being able to understand that they also can have some control around this belief of belonging or not belonging, I did not want to absolve the systems, the organizations, the context, or the people or individuals who might be exacerbating that.
Yeah.
So part of this is understanding that beliefs come from somewhere. And the one of I don't belong here is particularly striking because there's so much societal conditioning around it. And my question with my clients when they're dealing with this is, in what way are you internalizing the belief that others want you to have, but is not the one that's serving you nor the way that you want to feel?
Okay, so this piece feels really critical to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like that belief, you might be stuck on, but it's true. Yeah, but I am the only woman in this group of 8 men. I am the only 50-year-old in this group of 32-year-olds. Whatever
Absolutely.
it is, right?
Absolutely.
That might be true.
That might be true.
And you might have a belief around that. And you have agency in deciding what you're going to do with that belief and how you're going to nurture yourself around it.
You have agency over the narrative that you tell yourself around you being the only woman, for example, in the room. The truth is that you're the only woman in the room, but you choose whether that means that you belong or you don't belong there. You don't let other people dictate that.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. It's the narrative that we tell ourselves about the reality of what's happening. You might be the only Black person. You might be the only woman. You might be the youngest person in the room. You might be the only.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But then the layering on of I don't belong here is a choice, as tough as it is.
I think it is better understood when we talk through actual examples of it because, this stuff is really hard.
Yeah.
And so I think back to in my last company, I was a senior writer at Wired.
Yeah.
And I was the most senior female writer. I was on the magazine staff. But I knew when I came in that I was going to be the only woman in the senior ranks among the writers. And then I got there and I pitched my best ideas and none of them landed. There was a very different sensibility, a story sensibility. The guys I worked with, they liked these adventure stories. They liked technical stories about robots and software. And I wanted to do technology stories I wanted to do one about reproductive technology. And I told myself the most disempowering story you can imagine about that, Muriel. I knew it was fact that I was among the only female people on staff and the only senior female on staff. I felt that I didn't belong. I felt that my story ideas were bad and didn't matter. And it wasn't until I stepped outside of that organization and worked with an exceptional coach that I had that reframed and told myself a different story.
Which was what?
I have amazing ideas about technology, and I have a really unique perspective that isn't reflected in this magazine, and I have a lot to offer. They might or might not be able to make room for what I have to offer, but boy, did I have a lot to offer. Such an empowering story. But the thing that I want to honor in that process is the pain that comes with these.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It is hard. It is hard to do that work on your own.
Yes. When I am coaching someone and they'll say, God, like this is hard. And I said, I don't know where you saw in our agreement that I said that this would be easy. I said it would lead to more ease, but the process in of itself is, yes, it can be challenging because, and that's why most people don't do it, right? It is hard. Absolutely. And though it's doable. Right?
Yeah.
In the words of Glennon Doyle, we can do hard things.
And that is why we're sitting at this table.
Right.
Because we do hard things.
Yeah.
And this is the work of our careers.
Yeah.
When you're talking about what you need to learn, long before AI skills are going to help you, long before a better understanding of how to organize your email box is going to help you.
That's right.
going deep on your limiting beliefs and understanding how to unpack them will. I mean, you have some really great tools in this book. You have a 3-step roadmap to unblock yourself.
Yes.
Will you
Yes.
walk us through?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the notion is that a lot of times when people say, yes, I want a different outcome, they go straight to, okay, what do I do? Straight to action. And what I offer is you got to slow it down a little bit, not too much, but you got to slow it down before you move to action. So the 3-step process is to start with uncovering what your blocker is or your hidden beliefs, then move to unpacking it, and then you can move to unblocking, which is where all the action starts. So the uncovering is naming it. And first you're like, what am I naming? Well, you've got to figure out that I have some dissonance. So for example, your story when you were in that job and you were like, I'm pitching these articles and they're not landing. I feel like I'm not, working as best as I can. There's some dissonance. So people say like, well, how do you know you're there? Something feels off. That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
Either you're getting external cues, maybe it's some feedback, or you're seeing things happen that make you feel that way, or you feel it internally. Something feels off. Then you start the question and you're curious. What is it that I'm thinking about myself, about the other, or about the situation that is making me feel this way or that is making me act this way? Then you move to unpacking what the belief is and saying, okay, like in what way has that belief helped me in the past? And in what way may not be helping me right now? And let me actually really get to know it well and understand why it's there. Because at some point I might need it again.
Yeah.
Right?
This is where all the surprise and all the learning is.
Exactly. And so then when you're able to understand that, you can then move on to, well, what's the new belief, right? How do I reframe it? And from that reframe, you say, okay, if I operate with that new belief, what different actions might I take? And that is what then gets you into the unblock, the last phase, where you can actually start doing everything we want to do, which is to move to action.
I love that. And I also think that there's probably a little bit of back and forth on that scale, right?
Of
you
course.
Revisit, you try things, you experiment, you learn what works and doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is very iterative. And, as I say to all of my clients, quite frankly, and to myself, the work really never stops like a business. You don't just do one and done and then you walk away from the business.
Right.
You've got to go back. You've got to reassess. You've got to re-strategize. You've got to refigure out what you're going to do and what the culture is going to be, et cetera. So the process is very iterative, but I always ask people to do it with grace, have fun with it, because that is what will enable you to really grow in the way that you want to.
Well, you're asking us to step into a consistent learning mindset.
Yeah. It's also a call to be curious around your own leadership and why you do the way the things you do, why you behave the way you behave, why you think the way you think. That's just curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a call to realize that when you do this work, it has a huge impact on others. And quite frankly, it's what you're trying to do with others when you develop them. So be the first example. Start with yourself. I always say that a leader cannot expand the capacity of an organization beyond their ability of expanding their own capacity.
I love that. And you also walk the walk. And I loved when you spoke in particular about who you were when your twins were born.
Oh, my gosh.
Because I could see it. I could totally see it. So I wonder if you want to tell us a little bit about your own wrestling with your limiting beliefs.
So my method was achieve, achieve, achieve until I had my kids and I was trying to go about doing the work, like professional work and everything else in the same way.
Yeah.
And my way was also by trying to be involved in every little detail of everything that was happening. And so as you might imagine with my kids, I had, the spreadsheets and all the things, and I was micromanaging away with our caregiver and with my partner. And one day, her name is Veronica, and she's so wise. One day I heard her say under her breath when I was asking, the meticulous spreadsheet of everything that had happened that day with the kids.
Yep.
And she said, people think that if they control everything that happens with their kids, that nothing bad will happen. Your kids will teach you that's not the case. And Jessi, I remember in that moment, I kind of was like, huh? Like, how dare she? But, it's those whispers that stay with you. And it stayed with me because what I realized is in my attempt to try to control everything by being overly involved, not just with my kids, but with work and with everything, my trips and grocery shopping, like literally control everything, was my attempt to feel safe. Right? And underneath that was this belief that if I did not control, if something went wrong, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. And that is what plagues a lot of my clients. Mm-hmm. Even though they are, masters of the universe, if you will, they don't recognize that they don't have everything under control. And it's okay. None of us do.
So are you saying that one can actually stop micromanaging without losing control?
It's not to say that you should never micromanage. Micromanage the right things. Mm-hmm. It should be equated with the level of risk and the level of, ability to course correct in the future. Yeah. And which is why I think a big part of leadership, quite frankly, is risk management, right?
Yeah.
And so even that reframe, when I work with clients, it's if you approach this from a risk management standpoint rather than a relentless control and fear of something going wrong, which quite frankly, what does that do? That stifles innovation, right?
Yeah.
What would that look like? How would I go about managing the team if it was from that standpoint? Oh, I would probably only come down hard on these 3 things, but not as much on everything else.
That was Muriel Wilkins, CEO and founder of the advisory firm Paravis Partners and author of the book Leadership Unblocked. So what I loved about my conversation with Muriel was how easy it is to identify examples of what she was describing in my own life. I mean, probably in yours too, right? I can think about so many limiting beliefs and the way that I tell myself, the stories that hold me back. And it actually feels pretty scary to me to think about letting go of those stories. I mean, they've gotten me to here. I am squarely in the middle of my career. But I get it, what Muriel's saying. I get this idea that we're going to have to let go of those stories. And more importantly, we're going to have to tell ourselves different, new, and better stories. That is my challenge for myself this week. It is my challenge to you. I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. Thank you for joining us this week. I will be right back here in the studio next week. Hello Monday is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Ava Ahmad-Beghi and Adam Yates. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Sound design and engineering by Asaf Gadron. Our theme music was composed just for us by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Michaela Greer is a friend of the show forever. Kyle Ransom-Walsh is editor-at-large of editorial graphics. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. See you next week.